My sister-in-law tried to steal my brother. After discovering she was adopted, but her parents disowned her. I honestly don't know if I'm looking for advice or just a place to dump this massive weight that's been crushing my chest for months. I need an outside perspective because everyone in my life is too close to this, and I feel like I'm going crazy. I guess I should start at the beginning, back when things were normal. We live in Valparaiso, in Chile. If you've never been, picture a city clinging to the side of a steep hill. A chaotic rainbow of houses stacked on top of each other, all looking out at the Pacific. It's beautiful, but it's also a place where everyone knows everyone's business. The walls are thin, the living rooms are small, and secrets have a very short shelf life. Our family was no exception. There's me, Pilar. I'm the older sister, the one who watches everything. My brother Sergio is younger by a few years. He's a genuinely good man, the kind whose heart is too big for his own good. He feels everything so deeply, which is his greatest strength and, as I've learned, his biggest weakness. He's easily trapped between guilt and his sense of duty. A few years ago, he married Camilla. I know the whole sister-in-law thing can be a cliche on Reddit, but Camilla was never just a sill. From the moment she walked into our family's Sunday dinner, with her easy laugh and her willingness to help my mom in the kitchen without being asked, she was one of us. She became a true sister to me, the kind I could call in the middle of the night just to complain about a stupid movie. She and Sergio were perfect for each other. She grounded him, and he made her feel safe. And then there's Nadia, my sister, Sergio's sister. Before this whole nightmare started, she was just a normal part of our loud, messy family. We were all incredibly tight-knit. Every single weekend, we'd all gather, crammed into my parents' apartment that always smelled of sea salt and my mom's cooking. We'd argue over politics, laugh until our sides hurt, and support each other through everything. It was the kind of closeness you take for granted, until it's gone. Nadia and Camilla's relationship was fine, you know? They weren't best friends, but they were family. They'd team up to make fun of Sergio, they'd exchange little gifts on their birthdays. It was easy. It was comfortable. I look back on those days now, searching for a clue, a tiny crack in the foundation that I missed. But there was nothing. It was just us. A happy, complicated, loving family, completely unaware that we were about to be ripped apart from the inside. The earthquake that shattered our family didn't come from the ground. It came from a dusty box in my parents' attic. One afternoon, Nadia was looking for old photo albums and found it. Inside was her adoption paperwork. She was 28 years old and had just discovered her entire life, her entire identity, was built on a secret. The phone call from my mom was pure chaos, just sobbing and broken sentences. My first feeling was a gut-wrenching sympathy for Nadia. We all felt it. We pictured her world tilting off its axis, and we all rushed in to hold it steady. Sergio, of course, was the first one there. He dropped everything and drove to my parents' house to hold his sister while she fell apart. For the first week, we were a unit. We brought her food, we listened, we let her rage and cry. We reassured her that nothing had changed, that she was our sister, our daughter, and that we loved her. But grief is a strange, twisting thing, and Nadia's grief began to curdle almost immediately. She said she couldn't stand to be in my parents' house anymore, that looking at them felt like looking at strangers who had lied to her. So, she asked if she could stay with Sergio and Camilla for just a little while. Of course, they said yes. Sergio would have given her a lung if she'd asked, and Camilla, bless her heart, set up the spare room with fresh sheets and a little vase of flowers. She told Nadia, "Our home is your home for as long as you need it." I don't think any of us realized that Nadia heard forever. The first few weeks were manageable, but a little while stretched into a month, then 2. Her grief didn't soften. It sharpened. It became a tool. Her neediness became a constant, suffocating presence in their home. She'd call Sergio a dozen times if he and Camilla went out for dinner, her texts becoming more and more frantic until he'd have to leave to go calm her down. She started referring to their apartment as our place when I was on the phone with her. Little things, but they felt like tiny, deliberate cuts. Then came the comments, always aimed at Camilla but said just loud enough for everyone to hear. We'd be having coffee, and Nadia would sigh dramatically and say, "It's just so hard to talk about this stuff with people who can't possibly understand. It's a blood thing." She would look right past Camilla as she said it, as if she were a piece of furniture. I watched Camilla's smile get tighter and tighter. I saw her hands start to tremble slightly when she'd pour the coffee. She was trying so hard to be patient, to be the bigger person, but she was being systematically erased in her own home. The first time she said it directly was the moment my pity for her started to curdle, too. The four of us were in Sergio and Camilla's living room. Sergio had his arm around Camilla, and Nadia was watching them from the armchair, her eyes narrowed. She was talking about some memory from our childhood, and then she paused, looked right at Camilla, and said with a chilling sort of calm, "You're not real family, you know. You married in. You're not blood. If things got really bad, he'd choose me." The silence was deafening. I felt the air suck out of the room. I saw Sergio flinch like he'd been slapped. But it was Camilla's face that I'll never forget. She didn't cry or scream. She just deflated. All the light went out of her eyes. She gently removed Sergio's arm from her shoulder, stood up, and said quietly, "I'm going to go lie down." Sergio looked trapped, his face a mask of agony, torn between the wife he loved and the sister who was actively poisoning his marriage. He looked from Nadia's defiant face to the empty doorway his wife had just disappeared through, and he looked utterly, completely broken. I sat there, watching my brother get ripped in two, and I knew this wasn't just grief anymore. This was a hostile takeover. A few weeks later, we had one of our Sunday family dinners. It was the first one since Nadia had moved in with them, and the tension was so thick I could feel it buzzing on my skin. These dinners used to be the highlight of my week. Loud, chaotic, full of laughter and arguments over soccer. Now, it felt like a hostage negotiation. We were all speaking in low, careful voices, our words chosen to avoid setting off the bomb that was my sister's grief. My mom kept trying to force cheerful topics, asking about work and neighbors, but the conversation would just wither and die in the oppressive silence. Sergio and Camila sat next to each other, but there was a canyon of space between them. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept in weeks. And she looked like a ghost. She was physically there, but her usual warmth was gone, replaced by a fragile, brittle shell. She was trying, I could see her trying so hard. She'd made my dad's favorite dessert and was doing her best to smile and engage. The breaking point came from something so small, so innocent. My mom took a bite of the main dish, a pastel de choclo that Camilla had made, and she beamed. "Camilla, my love, this is incredible," she said, her voice warm and genuine. "You have to tell me what you did differently. It's perfect." It was a simple compliment, an act of love. But Nadia, who had been pushing her food around her plate with a sullen expression, put her fork down. It made a sharp clack against the ceramic, a sound that made us all flinch. The room went dead silent. She didn't look at my mom. She didn't look at anyone. She just stared directly at Camilla, her eyes cold and flat. "It must be nice," Nadia said, her voice low and venomous. "To be able to just cook your way into a family, to buy your place at the table." Camilla froze, her smile faltering. Sergio immediately said, "Nadia, that's enough." But Nadia ignored him. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving Camilla's face. The air crackled. I felt my own hands curl into fists under the table. Then she delivered the blow that shattered everything. "If you really loved him," she said, her voice dropping to an almost whisper that was louder than any shout, "you'd let him choose blood first." I will never, for as long as I live, forget the sound that came next. It wasn't a scream or a sob. It was the tiny metallic tink of Camilla's fork slipping from her trembling fingers and hitting the side of her plate. It was the only sound in the entire world. Her whole body went rigid. I saw her hands drop into her lap, trying to hide the shaking. Her face went completely pale, and her eyes, which were fixed on Nadia, filled with a kind of profound, bottomless hurt that stole my breath. It wasn't anger. It was the look of someone who had just been betrayed by a person they were trying to save. Without a single word, she pushed her chair back from the table. The scrape of the wood against the floor was agonizingly slow. She stood up, folded her napkin, and placed it next to her plate with a strange, detached calm. Then she turned and walked out of the room, her back perfectly straight. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She just vanished. The silence she left behind was horrifying. My mom had her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. My dad looked like he was about to have a heart attack, his face turning a deep, furious red. Sergio half rose from his chair, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out, his eyes darting between Nadia's triumphant, ugly expression and the empty doorway where his wife had just disappeared. He looked like a man being sawed in half. And me? In that moment, watching my brother paralyzed with indecision and seeing the wreckage of the kind, gentle woman he loved, any last shred of pity I had for Nadia turned to ash. It was gone. All of it. Her grief was real. I knew that. But this wasn't grief. This was cruelty. This was a calculated, vicious attack designed to destroy something beautiful because she was miserable. I looked at her smug face and I felt a cold, terrifying clarity wash over me. The time for walking on eggshells was over. This was a war for my brother's family. And I had just decided I was going to be the one to finish it. I watched Sergio stand there, frozen, for what felt like a lifetime. The sound of Camilla's car starting in the driveway was what finally broke the spell. He just sank back into his chair and put his head in his hands, his whole body shaking. My mom started crying softly, and my dad was just staring at Nadia, his face a thundercloud. But Nadia, she didn't look guilty. She looked satisfied, vindicated. And that was it for me. The last flicker of sympathy I had for her just went out. It was like a switch flipped in my head. A cold, hard clarity washed over me. Her pain was a real thing, a wound I couldn't even imagine. But she wasn't nursing it. She was sharpening it into a weapon and pointing it at the heart of my brother's marriage. I decided right then and there that I was done playing defense. I was done trying to manage her feelings. It was time to surgically separate the grief from the manipulation. Later that night, after my parents had left in a cloud of whispered, angry words, and Nadia had locked herself in the spare room, I found Sergio sitting alone in his dark living room. He was just staring at the wall, a ghost in his own home. When I sat next to him, he didn't even look at me. "She's not answering my calls," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Camilla, she won't answer." I put my hand on his back and I could feel the tremors running through him. "Sergio," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "You need to show them to me." He looked at me, confused. "Show you what?" "The texts. The messages from Nadia. All of them. I know she's been sending them. I need to see them." He looked away, a flush of shame creeping up his neck. He knew. He knew he'd been letting it happen. Without a word, he pulled out his phone, his thumb shaking as he scrolled, and handed it to me. I spent the next 20 minutes reading through a masterclass in emotional blackmail. It was all there, in black and white. She doesn't understand what it means to be family, not really. If you let her come between us, you're choosing a stranger over your own blood. She'll leave you one day, Sergio, but I'll always be your sister. You have to protect us. Every message was a little jab, a little twist of the knife, designed to isolate him and paint Camilla as the enemy. I felt a hot, metallic rage building in my throat. I took screenshots of everything. The next day, I called my parents. I didn't yell. I was eerily calm. "I'm not calling to blame you," I started, "but I need you to tell me everything. Everything Nadia said to you before she moved out. I need the truth because what she's doing to Sergio and Camila is not grief anymore. It's destruction." My mom started crying again, but my dad took the phone. His voice was tired, defeated. He told me things Nadia had conveniently left out of her victim narrative. He told me how they'd offered to pay for therapy, to find a family counselor, to do anything she needed to process the shock. He told me how she had refused it all, screaming that they were just trying to fix her and control her. Then he told me the final piece. They had found a letter from her birth mother, tucked away with the adoption papers. They had offered it to Nadia, but with one condition, that she open it with a therapist present to help her handle whatever was inside. She had called them manipulative monsters and stormed out. They weren't hiding her past. They were trying to protect her from it. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, fitting the pieces together. I sat in front of my laptop until 3 a.m., the blue light burning my eyes, my anger fueling me. I wasn't just looking for dirt. I was looking for a way out of this hell, for everyone. I researched adoption support groups in Chile, organizations that specialize in helping adoptees navigate the emotional minefield of searching for their birth families. I finally found one. A reputable, well-reviewed group that offered counseling, search assistance, and mediation services. They didn't just find names on a paper. They helped people build a bridge to their past without blowing up their present. I saved the link. I had the text from Sergio's phone. I had the truth from my parents. And now, I had a constructive path forward to offer her. My plan was set. It felt cold and calculated, and a part of me felt sick to my stomach. I wasn't trying to comfort my grieving sister anymore. I was building a cage for her, but I was also making sure the door was clearly marked exit. I knew the confrontation would be brutal. It would probably burn what was left of our family to the ground. But my brother's home was already on fire, and I was the only one holding an extinguisher. My first move was to try and be the bigger person. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I could get her into a room with a neutral third party, we could de-escalate. I called Nadia and asked her to meet me for coffee, just the two of us. She refused. So I went to Sergio's apartment, armed with the contact info for the support group, and a carefully rehearsed speech about finding a healthy way forward. I tried to talk to her in the living room, calmly. I told her I knew she was hurting, but that the way she was expressing that hurt was destroying the people who loved her most. Her reaction was volcanic. She didn't just refuse, she exploded. Her face contorted with a rage that was terrifying. She called me a traitor, a mouthpiece for those liars, our parents. She screamed that I was siding with Camilla, the cuckoo in the nest. Then came the threats. She pulled out her phone and waved it in my face, her voice dropping to a low, menacing hiss. You want to play games? I'll go online. I'll tell everyone what they did. I'll post the whole story, a smear campaign so big they'll never be able to show their faces in this town again. I'll expose all of you. It was in that moment, listening to her threaten to burn our parents' reputation to the ground, that my dad's words from our phone call came flooding back. He had told me the full story, the parts Nadia had conveniently omitted. It wasn't that my parents had disowned her. They had set a single boundary after she threatened to sell my grandmother's jewelry, heirlooms that had been in our family for generations, to pay for some shady online DNA service. And the letter from her birth mother? My parents weren't withholding it to be cruel. They had offered it to her, begging her to open it with a therapist so she wouldn't be alone when she read it. Their condition wasn't about control. It was about love. It was about protecting her from more trauma. And her response had been to try and pawn our family history. Hearing her threats of a smear campaign, knowing the truth, solidified everything for me. This wasn't about her pain anymore. This was a hostage situation, and she was holding a gun to all of our heads. My plan changed. A quiet mediation wasn't going to work. This required a full-blown intervention. I arranged it for the following Sunday. I hired a family counselor, a calm, older woman named Sophia, to be there as a mediator and a witness. I told my parents they had to be there. I told Sergio he had to choose right now whose side he was on, and to his credit, through his exhaustion, he chose his wife. The hardest call was to Camilla. She was staying with her mother and was hesitant, scared. I told her, I know you're hurt, but if we don't end this now, she will never let you go. You need to be there to see it end. She agreed. We all gathered in my parents' living room. The air was so heavy it felt hard to breathe. Nadia walked in last, expecting another Sunday dinner, and froze when she saw all of us and Sophia sitting there, waiting for her. Her eyes narrowed. What is this? An ambush? I stood up, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought I might be sick. My hands were shaking, so I clasped them behind my back. I looked at my sister, the sister I had loved my whole life, and I started. I didn't yell. I read her own words back to her, my voice clear and steady in the dead, silent room. I read the texts she'd sent Sergio. She'll leave you one day, Sergio, but I'll always be your sister. You have to protect us. I saw Sergio flinch, refusing to look at her. If you let her come between us, you're choosing a stranger over your own blood. Camilla closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Nadia's face went from defiant to pale with shock. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand and kept going. When I was done with the texts, I pulled two things from a folder on the coffee table. The first was a sealed envelope. "This is the letter from your birth mother," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "Our parents have been holding it for you, waiting for you to be ready to read it with support, not trying to hide it." I slid it across the table toward her. Then I placed a single printed sheet of paper next to it. "And this," I said, my voice dropping, "is the contact information for a group that helps people find their families. A real one, with counselors and support networks." I looked her straight in the eye, all the pain and anger and love and frustration of the past few months boiling up inside me. I let her see all of it. "You want a family, Nadia?" I asked, my voice breaking on her name. "Then stop trying to steal someone else's. Stop trying to burn this one down. Build your own story, the right way." The silence that followed my final words lasted maybe 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. It was the heavy, pressurized silence before a lightning strike. Nadia's face, which had been pale with shock, flooded with a dark, blotchy red. She didn't scream, not at first. She laughed. It was a horrible, broken sound, high-pitched and completely unhinged. She looked around the room at all of us, her eyes wild and glittering with tears of pure rage. "Wow," she spat, her voice dripping with venom. "A little courtroom drama. You must be so proud of yourself, Pilar, the righteous big sister, come to save the day." She snatched the letter and the paper from the table, not to read them, but to crumple them into a tight, angry ball in her fist. "You think this fixes anything? You think a piece of paper and some phone number for a support group makes up for a lifetime of lies?" She turned on my parents. "And you too. Sitting there like you're innocent. You brought a stranger into your house to watch you publicly execute your own daughter. I hope you're happy." My mom just sobbed into her hands. Then she fixed her gaze on Sergio. He finally looked at her, and his face was just shattered. "And you," she whispered, and the whisper was worse than any shout. "You let them do this. You let her," she said, jerking her head toward Camilla. "Replace me. I hope she keeps you warm at night, because you have no sister anymore." She threw the crumpled papers at my feet. They landed with a soft, pathetic thud. And then she was gone. She didn't just walk out. She fled, slamming the front door so hard that a picture frame on the wall rattled and fell to the floor with a crash of splintering glass. For a long time after, nobody moved. The only sounds were my mom's muffled crying and the frantic ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece. The counselor, Sophia, was saying something in a low, calm voice, but it was just noise. All I could hear was a high-pitched ringing in my own ears. I felt the initial rush of adrenaline drain out of me, leaving behind a cold, hollow space in my chest. I had won. The threat was neutralized. Camila was safe. Sergio was free. So why did I feel like I was going to throw up? That night, and for many nights after, I couldn't stop replaying that final scene. The look on Nadia's face as she crumpled that letter, a letter that might have held all the answers she ever wanted, haunts me. In my head, I had been the hero, the protector. I was performing a necessary surgery to save my family. But standing there in the wreckage, all I felt was a sick, creeping shame. Was it my place to orchestrate something so brutal? Was I a righteous protector? Or was I just a cruel puppet master, pulling everyone's strings to get the outcome I wanted? I don't for a second doubt that what Nadia was doing was wrong. She was weaponizing her very real, very deep pain, and she was going to destroy a beautiful marriage because of it. I know that. But did I have to do it like that? Did I have to humiliate her in front of everyone, reading her private, desperate messages aloud like a prosecutor in a trial? I saw her as a villain to be defeated, but I forgot that her story started with her being a victim of a secret that wasn't her fault. The pain of that discovery was real. The identity crisis was real. And I took that pain and used it as the final piece of evidence against her in my little kangaroo court. My whole justification for this was that belonging can't be taken by force. Nadia was trying to force her way back into a position of importance in Sergio's life by forcing Camilla out. But what did I do? I used force too. I used the force of public shaming, of social pressure, of a coordinated, calculated ambush. I didn't give her a choice. I gave her an ultimatum. I didn't try to heal the wound. I just tried to cauterize it, burning everyone in the process. I looked at the monster she was becoming, and in my attempt to stop her, I can't shake the feeling that I became a monster myself. The fallout was immediate and exactly as chaotic as I'd feared. That night, Nadia posted a long, vague rant on social media. It was one of those classic passive-aggressive posts, full of phrases like, "when your own family betrays you," and "some people will never understand real pain." There were no names, but it was pointed enough that anyone who knew us knew exactly who she was talking about. My phone buzzed with a few confused texts from cousins, but I ignored them. To their credit, my parents held their ground. They sent her one final, heartbreaking message saying they loved her, but that they would not be in contact again until she agreed to get professional help. The boundary they had tried to set was now a wall. The biggest change was at my brother's house. The day after the intervention, Sergio changed the locks. It was a small, practical act, but it felt monumental. It was him finally choosing his wife, choosing his marriage. Their healing wasn't instant. It was slow and painful. There were weeks of quiet, careful conversations. They started seeing a marriage counselor. But little by little, I saw the life come back into them. I'd go over for coffee, and I'd see them sitting on the couch, his arm around her, and this time she wasn't flinching away. I saw Camilla start to laugh again, a real unguarded laugh that I realized I hadn't heard in months. They were rebuilding, brick by painful brick, and seeing that felt like the only justification for the bomb I had detonated. And then, for about 3 months, there was just silence. A quiet, heavy peace. Life went on. We stopped walking on eggshells. But Nadia was a ghost in every family conversation, an unspoken absence at the dinner table. I honestly thought I might never speak to her again, and a part of me had made a grim kind of peace with that. Then, last week, I was at the grocery store, staring at a wall of olive oil and trying to remember which one my mom likes, when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting it to be Sergio, and my heart just stopped cold. It was a text from a number I had almost deleted a dozen times. It was from Nadia. My thumb hovered over the notification, my breath caught in my throat. I was terrified. Was this going to be another round of accusations? A final, hateful goodbye? I finally tapped it open, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. The message wasn't what I expected. It was short. Just 2 sentences. "I'm in a support group for adoptees." I read it once, then twice. I had to lean against the shopping cart to steady myself. After a few seconds, a second message bubble appeared. "Can you send me that link again? For the search group." I just stood there in the middle of the grocery aisle crying. It wasn't a big dramatic sob. Just silent, hot tears rolling down my face. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a happy ending. But it was a beginning. It was a tiny, fragile little shoot of green pushing its way up through scorched earth. I sent her the link without a word. She sent back a simple, "Thanks," and that's been it. So, Reddit, here I am. That's the whole story. I look at my brother and his wife, and I see a marriage that is healing, a love that I helped save. But then I think about my sister, alone, pushed to the absolute brink of her emotional endurance before she could even start to pick up the pieces of her own life. I did what I thought was necessary. So, Ada, I exposed my sister-in-law's manipulative behavior in a calculated and public way. I might have saved my brother's marriage, but I also pushed a grieving woman to rock bottom. Was I a necessary evil? Or did I become the asshole in my attempt to stop one?